Hi, I'm Phil, and I am a middle child. And that is important context because a lot of this, what I'm about to share with you, is related to middle child syndrome. So if you're a middle child or you have a middle child, yeah, I can recognize them around the room. Um, then you know what this is a little bit like. But hopefully you can hear that as we come. I was one of three boys. And like any middle child, or so the Google tells me, I had to fight for attention. And at least that is my excuse for what happened next. I fell in love with performing. That's really the starting point of my story. This is what today is going to be a little bit like. It's going to be a bit of my story, a slightly condensed version maybe, but hopefully we'll keep it moving along. I loved performing. I fell in love with the stage. I just really always wanted to tell stories. That's what I wanted to do, tell stories. I think I was about 8 or 9 when I first joined a drama club. It was Helen O'Grady's drama school. And when that folded about a year later, I joined Shinfield Players Theatre in Reading. And I stayed there right up until I went to university. So about when I was 18 or so, I was there. And I did youth productions, I did pantomimes, I did the senior plays, the senior musicals, so proper plays and musicals. I did some behind the scenes stuff, some tech stuff, and backstage stuff. I love that theatre. It's still there. It's gone through various times of financial woes, and it's always got this threat of closing down, but it's still there. So if you're ever driving past the old Foster Wheeler building at the Black Boy Roundabout in Reading, there's a little theatre there. It had its drama. Ha, 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 ha. So there's more of those. Don't worry about it. It had its drama, but I loved it. But here's the thing: I wasn't ever the star. In any other productions, I was never the star. Always kind of a sporting role. But that's okay, because being a performer is a lot like being a doctor. We might have some doctors here today. With a doctor, you carve out your speciality, don't you? I've had 2 hip surgeries. I'm very thankful for hip surgeons because of their speciality. With performing, it's similar. You've got to carve out your niche. You've got to find the thing that you do that other people don't do. So that's what I was going to do. I was going to find my niche. And the first thing I tried, I think, was puppets. If you were at a holiday club over the last week, you would have seen some of my puppets. James, who played Carl on the Friday, he was my first puppet. And I got him when I was about 10 or so. And I've been doing, I think puppets are great because puppets can connect with people in a way that other people can't. They can do things that people can't while still being a performance. But it wasn't a career. You don't see many people with a career in puppets. And really, I wasn't good enough, I think, to have a career on Sesame Street or anything like that. So the next thing I learned was, of course, you're a young lad, you want to perform, you learn magic. Of course you do, don't you? You learn magic. You want to wow people, dazzle people, entertain people, don't you? You want to make cards appear and disappear, and you want to be impressive. The thing about magic is it takes a lot of time and practice, a lot of dexterity. And I just wasn't good enough, I think, to make a career out of magic. I didn't have the time, the energy, the attention to do that focus. So as a teenager, I learned some other things. I thought, what's impressive, what's dazzling? Well, you learn circus skills. Of course, you all did, didn't you? Some of you did, some of you did. I thought the people who are nodding would be the people who did. So I learned how to juggle. In a shop, a man taught me how to juggle. As I picked up the juggling balls, he said, "Do you want to learn how to do it?" I said, "Yes." And there I learned in that shop when I was a teenager how to juggle. But here's the thing. I could get up to 4 balls, but I could never quite get the 5th ball. I just wasn't quite good enough to get to the 5th ball. By this point, I was in my late teens, and in your late teens, you're desperate to be impressive. Why? Because you want to impress the girls, don't you? So what do you do to impress the girls as a late teen? We've done the juggling here. We've done the juggling. Maybe that's what you did. Did it work? Of course. You learn the Rubik's Cube. Was that the right choice? The thing is, I can do a Rubik's Cube in about a minute, which is pretty good. If you're at a holiday club, you might have already seen it. But the competitors do it about 20 times faster than that. They do it in about 5 seconds to compete. My next door neighbor could do it one-handed behind his back, blindfolded, in 19 seconds. So I wasn't quite good enough to do much with a Rubik's Cube. So I learned some instruments. I play a bit of guitar, I play a bit of ukulele, I play a bit of trumpet, I play a bit of accordion. None of them well. I wasn't quite good enough. So in my performance, I'd diversified out. I'd become a jack of many trades and master of none. But throughout that time, I'd been acting still the whole time, like I'd said. So I went to university to be an actor. I went and studied drama at Winchester University. I may not be a star. You don't need to be a star necessarily to be an actor. I loved it, so I went to university to study drama. And at university, I got involved in loads. But the theme of my youth, it carried on. So I started playing ultimate frisbee. I played with a team in Reading that went to the World Championships, the European Championships. They won the European Championship, not with me on the team. I wasn't quite good enough for that team. I performed in all the musicals across my time at university, but I was always in the chorus. Actually, once I directed, and even then I managed to be on as a dancing role only. I won't dance for you because that I'm definitely not good enough at. I was working on something I really loved in drama, but my grades weren't reflecting that. In fact, I only got a D at A-level drama, and it was my favourite subject. It was the only thing I cared about. It was what I was going to university to do, and I had a D, so I was lucky even to get in. It turned out I wasn't really very good at the thing I was studying. I had lots of friendships, but I was never really in the inner circle of a group. And I had lots of relationships. The Rubik's Cube, it paid off, guys. But the reality was the physical intimacy, that sort of stuff, it was often wrought with things like pain and hurt and misery. It led to fallings out and breakings up. It led to lots of drama and not the kind of drama that I was studying. I wasn't good enough for anything, I felt, not even love. Now, my brothers, they were studying real subjects. Two brothers I mentioned, older and younger. One was a medical physicist at a really prestigious university. One was an aeronautical engineer. So they're doing real subjects. I was a middling drama student and an ex-polytechnic. So the long and short of it was, much like my Rubik's Cube, I was pretty muddled. I was pretty lost. I was pretty confused. I felt useless. I felt unfixable. I felt incomplete and broken. I felt I wasn't very good at anything, and therefore I wasn't any good to anyone. There was the low point was, I remember really well, was one day I'd woken up about midday, I went back to bed about 3 in the afternoon, and I thought, actually, would the world be better off if I just didn't wake up in the morning? Would anyone mind? Would anyone notice? Would anyone care? I was pretty miserable. I was pretty sad. Of course, I did wake up the next morning. You can tell that I'm here before you today. And wouldn't it be cool if the story then was I woke up the next morning and I rolled over, and there on my bedside table was the Bible open on, I don't know, Philippians 4, verse 6, and Jesus appeared and said, hey, just believe, and everything got better. Now, some of that sort of stuff has happened in my life, and you can ask me about that later maybe, but it didn't happen then. That would be cool, but it didn't happen. God doesn't always jump in and solve the pain. That's what I was learning at that point in time. I mean, I'd grown up in a Christian family. I had really good Christian parents, really good Christian grandparents. I went to a pretty good church with really good youth work, and I knew all the right answers. I was that kind of kid. But man, was God far away at that point in time. I mean, I hadn't looked for him either. I hadn't gone to church for the best part of 3 years. I'd not been very interested in faith at all. I was kind of like a box, if I can remember what pocket I put it in. I was kind of like a box that I'd sealed shut. I'd said, God, I don't want you in. And the way I was living, it was like I was putting a seal on that box, and really didn't want God. Oh, I'm bashing the microphone, apologies. I did not want God in. That's how I was living my life. But yet, in that youth group, in that youth work at church, I'd been told that God was for me, that no matter what, he was going to be there, that he was good, and he wanted to help me. That there wasn't going to be, that he had a plan for me, and it was plans to prosper, not to harm, that he was near. And I was asking the question, well, where is he? I remember crying and praying in the bath one night, "Where are you, God? I've asked for you to come. I've asked you to show me something. I've asked you to tell me something." But he was silent. But here's the thing. I knew I wasn't good enough for God. I'd broken every rule that I'd been taught as a kid growing up. I'd slept around. I'd sworn. I'd drunk. I'd binned off church for pretty much anything else. I was not good enough for God. Food's about to be served. Shall I stop? No, okay, we'll keep going. So what happened? God didn't jump in then, but there was a changing point. I won't go into all the details. It was a long, slow change, but the kind of main thing was I met Heather, who's my wife, if you don't know. Re-met Heather. It's a long story. Anyway, I started dating Heather, and she was in a similar boat to me, except with one key difference. She was living with her parents, and they were still dragging her along to her church, their church. And I thought I was a Christian, so being a good boyfriend, I went along as well. And man, was it boring. There were no flags to wave. The church I grew up in had flags and banners that you could wave. There was no half an hour rock concert type worship music like the Christian festivals that I'd been going to. The focus was on the main act of preaching and what the Bible had to say, specifically what it had to say about Jesus. And I remember getting really annoyed because I was like, we're talking about David. Jesus doesn't appear for ages. Why are we talking about Jesus again? And maybe you felt like that in church. But something was happening. And I don't know what you know about solving Rubik's Cubes. But if you know anything, the first thing you learn when you're solving Rubik's Cubes is you have to start with the cross. You start with the cross, and after that, pieces start to fill in. And I found that the same is true with us. That's what I was learning at this church, that broken people can be fixed. Muddled people can be sorted out. But it's not by our own efforts. It's not by us doing the right things or saying the right things or being the right kind of people. It's entirely by God's grace. Romans 3 says this, "For all have sinned and fall short of the glory of God. And all are justified freely by his grace through the redemption that came by Christ Jesus." God presented Jesus as a sacrifice of atonement through the shedding of his blood to be received by faith. Here's the thing, I wasn't good enough for God. I had said that and I knew that, and that was right. But the thing was, no one was good enough for God. In Jesus' death, he covers my sin. He covers over what I had got wrong and all the things I had done wrong. The pieces, they were starting to fall into place. The cross had led to something more. Now, I was still lost and muddled. I wasn't completely there, but things were starting to make sense. I couldn't tell you exactly where or how, but something had changed. That locked box that I had done to keep God out. Well, God, he had a way to break through my defenses. I didn't do anything. It was all about what God had done. He revealed himself to me, and he came through his word in the Bible, that preaching every week that I was hearing. So in my own time, the Bible started to speak to me. Maybe you know Psalm 13. Those words of David's were my words. "How long, Lord, will you forget me forever?" Well, that's what I was thinking and feeling. But David goes on to rejoice in God's goodness, his plan, his purpose, even though he can't see it. I heard in the narratives, Moses, when God calls him to be the leader of his people, do you know what Moses says? "Me? I'm not good enough. Couldn't be me. Send someone else," said Moses. And that happens over and over and over again throughout the Bible. I mean, look at the failings of Peter in the Gospels, one of Jesus' closest friends, riddled with doubt and denying Jesus. I came to see, as I heard this in the Bible, that it wasn't about me being good enough for God, but only about how good he is for me, to me. And you've probably all heard this. I'm not saying anything groundbreaking here. But if you've ever felt like we're not good enough, particularly as men, I think, I don't know about you, but often I struggle with the different roles I have in life. I've got father, husband, employee, whatever it is. You're juggling those different roles, aren't you? Are we good enough? Maybe it eats you inside. It certainly did for me. It's where I struggle most today. Am I doing good enough? Well, the answer is no. I'm limited. You're limited. We were made limited by God. God made us, that we can't do everything. And yet, despite that, despite our limitations, that same God, the God that can create the universe with words, that same God chose to die for us, to give his life for us. That's how much he cares for us. That's how much he loves us. And that is where we find our worth. It doesn't really matter how much we can juggle, both metaphorically and physically. God made us with limits. God loved us with our limits. And more than that, God uses us with our limits. And God uses our limits. God uses our not good enoughs. God reveals himself in both the mundane things and the miraculous things. And maybe we find that we're more involved in one than the other. Let me take you back to those preachers, the ministers at that church that I started going to with Heather. I told you they were dull. They were not exceptional preachers. Maybe you've heard exceptional preachers. These were not them. But what they were faithful and true, and their words often led me to where I am today, where I get to use those strengths, those skills that I saw as weaknesses, weak strengths, juggling, puppets, whatever it is, where I get to use those to tell a story, the greatest story ever told, the story of Christ's love for us. And like I said right back at the beginning, I've always just wanted to tell stories. So sometimes God knows us better than we know ourselves. God uses us in ways we can't anticipate or know. But he has not made you not enough. And that was the message that I learned. I'm not good enough. He covered me and uses all those weaknesses to serve him. It is breakfast time. I will stop there. There's some pieces of paper on the tables with some questions that you might want to think about with the people around you. And I'll pass this back to Nick.